from a forest carbon point of view, could you tell us your views on Copenhagen?
Sure. For Copenhagen, RED was one of the few areas where there was clear demonstrable progress. Ivo de Boer in Bonn described it as being one of the only areas that he felt the text could basically be put aside and just picked up again in Cancun. It also, not directly from the text, but it also spawned the Paris-Oslo process, which is looking at setting up some kind of voluntary framework, which will eventually be folded either back into the UN process or will be kind of brought to a halt. That currently on the sidelines of Copenhagen, I think $3 billion of funding was agreed out to 2012. At the Paris meeting of the Paris-Oslo process a few weeks ago, an extra $1 billion was agreed out to 2012, and it's anticipated that more money will be forthcoming in Oslo on the, I believe it's the 26th of May.
You can see from your report there's a lot of interest in forestry and carbon investments, but how do you turn that interest into investment?
There's a number of routes. Primarily, from the private sector viewpoint, it really comes down to being able to demonstrate value in the investment. It's something that's often forgotten when there's a lot of discussion of the private sector has to put X billion into mitigation activities, which is currently being discussed by the high-level group on carbon finance, which is looking at ways to raise an estimated $100 billion a year by 2020. Depending on who you talk to, about 30 to 70 billion of that is supposed to be coming from the private sector. The private sector money is actually everyone's money. It's people's pensions, it's their savings and so on. So there has to be some kind of return on that and a mechanism to produce that return. The most efficient way that we have at the moment of doing that is essentially via the carbon markets. Now, in order for that to work, then there needs to be demand for carbon credits. That was something that was alluded to earlier on. The United States has a very, very, very engaged attitude towards forestry offset credits. And if something happens in the US, in the kind of short to medium term, then we would expect that to be a game changer for the forestry industry.
Do you think we need that? Because I think there's a perception that the UK and Europe is behind the US in RED and carbon investment things. What do you think?
Well, on the one hand, you have the Paris-Oslo process that's essentially leading the field in RED. On the other hand, you have the European emissions trading scheme isn't allowed to use forestry credits. And that's something that needs to be addressed, because obviously if any kind of market mechanism is going to be involved, there needs to be demand for the credits. Currently, the European emissions trading scheme represents the largest single source of demand for credits of any kind. And it has a number of features that make it particularly attractive for developers, and that there's an annual true-up, so you get annual wedges of demand predictably every year. And you have a lot of different players that are involved in that market, so you get a greater liquidity and depth to the market than you get maybe with if you were looking to sell to governments. Currently under Kyoto, the governments really only have to go to the market once, and they're big block buyers, so you don't really get that dynamic market and the innovation that goes along with it.
During the report, you were quite passionate about indigenous communities, talking about connecting with them. And obviously the report lists South America, Southeast Asia, Africa as desirable areas to invest. How do you deal with the indigenous communities there and help them get the most out of the credits?
Via programs like the CCBA. That's essentially, and there are other ways of doing it as well. But as I said, I mean, it's one thing for the government to be given X amount of money to protect X hectare sort of rainforest. At the end of the day, people live in it, and quite often they draw their livelihoods from it, either by logging or by cutting down forest and growing crops and so on. So the solution really has to be on the ground, and then there's two ways of doing that. You either enforce rules or you engage with people and offer them some benefit from actually actively protecting the forest. And I think of the two, engaging with people and offering them clearly demonstrable benefits from engaging in protecting the process the preferable route.
Excellent. Thank you very much.